Hello, everyone. It's Chris from Chris Beat Cancer, and today my guest is none other than the one and only John Robbins. John Robbins is the author of 9 bestsellers that have sold over 3 million copies. His books have been translated into more than 31 languages. This includes Diet for a New America, The Food Revolution, Healthy at 100, and with his son Ocean, Voices of the Food Revolution. John is the founder and board chair emeritus of Earth Save International. He's co-founder and co-host of the 250,000 member Food Revolution Network. And he's been the recipient of numerous awards: the Albert Schweitzer Humanitarian Award, the Green America Lifetime Achievement Award, and many others. John lives with his wife of 49 years, Dio, in California. And I've actually been to John's house. It is in a beautiful setting, and I just had the opportunity to spend a day with him and his family last year, and it was really special. So, John, thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast.
Thank you, Chris. My pleasure to be with you.
So, man, we have so much we could talk about. So, can we start with your story? You know, some people know it, other people don't. Your last name is Robbins, of Baskin Robbins fame, and can you talk about the decision you made to not take over Baskin Robbins?
Yes, I can. It was a long time ago, but it defined my life from then on. My dad and my uncle were the founders, Irv Robbins and Bert Baskin. My dad and my uncle owned the company, and they founded it, and they developed and they ran it, and it became the world's largest ice cream company. A phenomenally successful company. And I was my father's only son. So he was a patriarchal guy, and he believed that women should not work, kind of old fashioned in that way. But all the weight of his expectations for the business were on me. And he groomed me from my earliest child to succeed him. That was his plan. And, sometimes as parents, we have beliefs about what will make our kids happy and prosperous and secure and give them good lives. And if that vision that we have for them is in alignment with their own destiny and gifts and what gives them joy in their lives, that's beautiful. But if it's not, then you have a problem, and we had that problem because I wasn't called to this. I mean, I loved it growing up. I worked in all the different parts of the company. I loved ice cream. I invented flavors.
Who does?
I invented Jamocha almond fudge.
Are you serious?
I did.
That's awesome.
And others, and I loved it, but my dad was not well, overweight, very sick. My uncle, Bert Baskin, my dad's brother-in-law and co-founder of the company, died of a heart attack at the age of 54.
Whoa.
And he was a very big guy, and he ate a lot of ice cream, as all of us did, and that's young. Yeah. And when he died, I asked my dad, you think there could be a connection between the amount of ice cream he would eat and his death? And my dad said, oh, no. His ticker just got tired and stopped working.
Okay.
And so that was the verbal message, but the subliminal message, when I looked into his eyes and his energy expression and his body language, basically said, don't you ever ask that question again. And, John Bradshaw, the psychologist, used to talk about there being no talk rules in families, subjects that were taboo. You just can't talk about them. And in my family, it was there might be a connection between ice cream and heart disease. Boy, that you just get. So my dad said, no, and I could understand. He had by that time manufactured and sold more ice cream than any human being who had ever lived on this planet. He didn't want to think the family product was harming anybody, much less that it might have contributed to the death of his brother-in-law and partner, my uncle. But I felt, okay, he can't consider that. He just can't. I must. I have to look into this. I don't want the karma here. And I don't think
what age are you around this time?
20, 21.
In your 20s?
Yeah, old enough. I'm coming into my own thoughts and feelings, and I'm wanting to take responsibility for my choices in my life. And on the one hand, here's my dad offering me a path paved with gold, frankly. And on the other hand, there's my conscience. And, I did make a choice for conscience and integrity. And I walked away from the company. And I also told my dad to be in integrity with my choice. And frankly, to be in integrity with him, I said I didn't want to have any access to his money. I didn't want a trust fund. I didn't want an inheritance. I didn't want any dependence whatsoever on his fortune, which was considerable. And I walked my own rocky road after that.
Well, I know what it's like to walk a rocky road alone, right?
Yes.
So, I'm curious about, were there books or influencers or, at that time in your life that really changed your mind or opened you up to nutrition and got you thinking differently?
Well, yes. My uncle died of a heart attack at 54. My dad was overweight, had diabetes. My mom and my aunt, everybody was overweight. And nobody was happy. There was this pursuit of materialism. Money's fine, money's good. I'm not a fan of poverty, but when money becomes the goal, the end in itself, and it supplants kindness and it supplants, caring for one another, and everything is about making money. I think we impoverish ourselves that way, no matter how much money we have. And my family of origin had an enormous amount of money, but I cannot say there was an enormous amount of love. In fact, I'd say the opposite. So I wasn't really drawn to it, even though the ice cream was delicious and the money was a lot and all that. But I felt also, I was a child of the 60s. I came of age in the 60s, and I had the pleasure and the privilege of working with Dr. Martin Luther King. And I was deeply moved by him. I was very inspired by him. And I felt called through my interactions with him to a different way of life than one that just pursued financial success, if that was at the expense of others. And I began to feel like ice cream. Now, an ice cream cone isn't going to hurt anybody, one. But if you're in the business, you want people to buy more than one. You want them to buy a lot. You want them to eat a lot of it. And the more ice cream people eat, the more likely they are to have a heart attack, like killed my uncle, Bert Baskin. The more likely they are to be overweight, like everybody in my family was. And I'm not pointing the finger at Baskin Robbins per se. Ben and Jerry's, very popular ice cream company. Ben Cohen, peace activist, lovely man, founder of that company, longtime co-owner of it, had a quintuple bypass in his late 40s.
Wow,
Big man,
that's
weighed a
early.
lot of ice cream. And it's what I'm trying to say is Baskin Robbins, Ben and Jerry's, Haagen-Dazs, it doesn't matter which company. Ice cream itself is not good for your cardiovascular system. It is not good for any part of your body, actually. It is not good for your mind. It's not. And if you want to have cancer, it's a good food to eat.
It's not just ice cream, right? Ice cream is a component of the Western diet, which is rich in meat and dairy and processed food.
Yes, yes. And I also, I went with my dad once to the dairy where we got a lot of our milk products, a very enormous dairy in the Central Valley of California. And at the time, all of the stores, the ice cream stores, had on the wall behind the counters these beautiful sepia tone photographs of Guernsey and Holstein dairy cows grazing in beautiful grasslands. Wisconsin, they were taken to Wisconsin. But we didn't get our milk from Wisconsin. The Baskin Robbins was based in Southern California at that time. And most of our milk products came from Southern California or for the Central Valley anyway. So we went to one of these dairies, and the cows were in feedlots. They never saw a blade of grass in their whole lives. And the contrast between the anxiety and stress that these cows lived in and the pictures on the walls and the ice cream stores was glaring to me. And I thought, we're lying to the public. We're presenting an image that may be wholesome and reassuring and soothing and calming, but it's not the truth. And similarly, ice cream, our motto at Baskin Robbins that year was, we make people happy. And I told my dad, no, we don't. We sell ice cream. We sell a product that provides momentary pleasure at the expense of people's long-term health. He didn't like that. So we weren't seeing eye to eye. And I was feeling part of a revolution, if you will, or a transformation in our society that I wanted to see us become more connected to one another so that we don't make our success at somebody else's expense. To me, that's not success. That's not the success I want. So my conscience was pulling me, my integrity. I made a choice for integrity, and I walked away from it and the money and lived a very different life. Very different life.
That is, I mean, I have so much admiration for you, John. I mean, it had to be such a difficult decision to make to walk away from the family business. And I imagine it probably put considerable strain on your relationship with your father.
It did, and I regretted that, and I tried to be as respectful as I possibly could, but it came down to the fact that I was rejecting his life work,
Yeah.
and that's hard. It put a lot of strain on the relationship. It did, and in the long run, though, there was a lot of healing in that relationship because he continued to run Baskin Robbins, eventually sold it, and became one of the wealthiest men in the country. But his health was going downhill rapidly. And then I wrote Diet for a New America, and we weren't really seeing each other very much. But I sent him a copy, which he didn't read. But then he went to his cardiologist because he was so ill. And his cardiologist, this was a miraculous moment, leveled with him and said, "Mr. Robbins, at this point, you're very ill. And the best thing we can do for you right now is to juggle your medications and hopefully make your few remaining years a little more comfortable. But if you really want to get well and you're willing to make major changes, then there might be a different outcome for you." My father was scared. And he said, "Well, what do you mean by major changes? What would I have to do?" And the cardiologist reached back and picked up a book and handed him a copy of my book, Diet for a New America, and
That's
said,
amazing.
"You should read this book." And the irony is the book had just come out. The physician, the cardiologist, did not know that the John Robbins who had written it was the son of his patient, Mr. Baskin.
What year did that book first come out?
87.
Okay.
And this was 88 that this happened. And my father knew, of course. He already had a copy. I'd sent him one, an autographed one, but he hadn't read it. But now he didn't tell the doctor. He just took the book. I think it was kind of a karmic collision, actually, at that moment. I wished I could have been a fly on the wall, seeing his face. But he told me about it many times afterwards, because what happened after that was he began to read the book. And he made changes, and he read more and made more changes and made more changes and got more results and better results. He lived 20 more years, most of them very healthy. His cholesterol came down to normal levels. His blood pressure got improved greatly. He got off his blood pressure meds that they said he'd have to take for the rest of his life. His diabetes went into remission. It had been very severe. They were talking about an amputation of a leg, possibly in blindness, but his diabetes went away. He stopped eating sugar completely. He stopped eating ice cream completely. He became virtually a vegan, although he said, "I'm not a card-carrying vegetarian," as though McCarthy was present and it had something to do with communism. I don't know. But the point is, he really did have tremendous healing as a result of the changes he made. And I thought, if my dad, who was so entrenched and identified with ice cream and steaks and that way of life, can make these changes and get these kinds of results, there's hope for any of us. And he became very, very proud of me, and we had a lot of reconciliation in later years. And at one point he said, "Thank God you had the courage to follow your own star."
So did he quit eating ice cream altogether?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so people don't even know that. Like, I'm excited that people will hear this podcast and learn that. It's amazing. So
yes.
Talk about, what is the Diet for a New America? What diet were you talking about in that book?
Well, it's a plant-strong, whole foods diet. So, over half the calories in the Western diet come from ultra-processed food. In my diet, in the diet I eat and what I would like to see people eat, none of the calories come from ultra-processed food, or maybe a tiny, tiny bit if necessary. But really minimize that and if possible, eliminate it, because those foods aren't foods. They really aren't. They're food-like, Michael Pollan calls them food-like substances. And I think that's more accurate. So I don't eat, there's no processed foods. Whole foods, the way nature intends. And lots of fresh vegetables and whole fruits and berries in particular, and mushrooms and greens, lots of greens, all kinds of greens. And if you're going to eat grains, then whole grains. The pseudo grains like buckwheat is good and quinoa is good. If you can handle the gluten, then whole wheat bread or sprouted bread, if you're going to eat bread from sprouted grains. But to base your and for fats, eat the healthy fats, seeds and nuts and avocados. And if you're inclined to get some omega-3s from fish, you want to get the fish that are high in omega-3s and low in mercury. And you want to be very discerning. Which?
Like salmon.
Yes, yes. Wild salmon is better than farmed.
Wild, yeah, it's got to be wild. Yes.
Yeah, for a lot of reasons.
Let's definitely make that point.
Yeah, and this is the way people eat. This is not a revolutionary diet. It seems revolutionary because we've gone so astray. Our diets are killing us. They're bankrupting us. They're leading to ridiculous rates of obesity and diabetes and heart disease and cancer in younger and younger people. None of that is necessary. None of it, we really can't avoid and prevent the vast majority of the degenerative diseases that plague our society. And they're not inevitable. They're not a natural part of aging. Most of our older people have dementia of one form or another. Half of those 85 or older have Alzheimer's in our society. That's not necessary. That's not even, we take it as like that's the norm now. We have normalized disease in ways that is really not necessary. Stupid.
So what about what about the dietary components that have been demonized so heavily? Fruit and carbs like beans, rice, and potatoes.
Okay, well, fruit, I enjoy fruit. Now, there are sweet fruits like mangoes and bananas that I want to eat in moderation, carefully. But there's other fruits like berries and apples and pomegranates are really full of a remarkable array of antioxidants and phytochemicals and phytonutrients of all kinds that you really, they're superb sources of those things. So I eat a lot of berries. And I also eat pomegranates, and I eat some fruits that are sweeter, like apples and pears, but mostly it's the berries for me. I love the colors, and those colors actually represent nutrients.
Yeah.
They're not just visually attractive and beautiful, which they are, but they're also they are signators of nutrients that they convey and that we need. So I'm not against fruit at all, although. When you started drinking like apple juice, or that's been all the fiber has been taken out and just the sugar is left, and sometimes it's sweetened, now you're into territory that you're starting to get into processed foods. You can take a fruit and make it into a processed food, like you can do that with anything, and the Western food machine is great at doing that. But in their natural state, and I love berries in particular, and then carbs. I think carbs have gotten an odd rap because carbohydrates, we're a carbon-based life form, and carbohydrates are give us energy. But such a very high percentage of the carbohydrate load in the Western diet is ultra processed. So you're talking about they take a wheat and then they modify it through breeding into something that it wasn't originally. Then they grind it and take the germ out, which contains the vitamin E and some of the other basic nutrients. Take the bran out, which contains the fiber. They leave just the endosperm, which is just the pure starch. Then they bleach that, so it'll have an indefinite shelf life. Then they spray some synthetic vitamins in there, as if that made up for the nutrients they've taken out. Then they put it into a pastry or a bread that's full of sugar and high fructose corn syrup and all kinds of chemicals to make it elastic and give it a certain dough conditioners and all kinds of crap. And then they call that bread, the staff of life. No, it's the staff of death by then. Mm-hmm. But if you talk about vegetables are mostly carbohydrate. They're not high in fat. They have protein in them, but so do grains. So whole grains in their natural state, in the right proportion, in your diet. And when I say the right proportion, that's everybody has to determine for themselves at each stage of life they're in, because we're evolving beings interacting with, I think we are ecosystems within ecosystems. And so you have to sense that for yourself. I eat a lot of beans, legumes, different kinds, split peas and beans, but I sprout them first and then I cook them or eat them raw. Mostly I cook them. And I enjoy them. That's one of my sources of protein in my diet.
Me too.
And I digest them very well. I thrive on that. Someone else might not. You always have to fine tune and respond to and respect your biochemical individuality.
Yeah. I think it's important to note too that when someone makes a significant diet change, in the beginning, their body is going to react to it in a way that's usually negative, right? Because their digestive tract is not populated with the right bacteria. They may have excess
Yes.
gas from, they start eating lots of fruits and vegetables and they were eating lots of meat and dairy. There's a transition period where at first you're just going to feel kind of, things are just going to kind of be off. And it takes a few weeks for your taste to change, for your body to adapt to
Yeah.
healthy food. And so anybody listening to this, I don't want you to think, I hear this, I know, John, you've heard this lots of times, but someone will say, I'm going to start eating healthy and I'm going to start eating a raw food diet or whatever. And then the first couple of days, they feel terrible. They're like, oh, I can't do this. I just feel so bad. I need meat. And what they don't understand is you're having major food withdrawals right now. You're having
Yes.
salt, sugar, oils, protein, like caffeine. You're withdrawing from all this stuff. And that's why you feel bad. It's not because you need it. It's because your body's like detoxifying, withdrawing.
I agree completely. And your word withdrawal is the perfect word because these foods are addictive. They are physiologically addictive. And the food industry has in their employ technicians, scientists that they call craveability experts. That is the term that they use. And it is the job of these scientists to produce foods that have the maximum craveability. That is addiction. They're making foods addictive, and we see this with rats, and we see this in brain scans with humans. That refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup light up the same part of the brain in brain scans as does cocaine, and sometimes it lights it up brighter. And that is addiction at work, and it's hard. So when a person is used to eating foods that are addictive and bad for you, even though you're shifting to healthier foods and you're getting more nutrients, and you think by that you should be feeling better, you're in withdrawal. That's the perfect word for it. And it can last a while because some of these addictions are really deep. And we know the troubles that people have if they're addicted to heroin or cocaine or alcohol or cigarettes, and how hard it is sometimes for people to break those addictions. And they need 12-step programs, they need social support. Sometimes they need rehab programs. We provide those things, hopefully, to people who have those needs, who have gotten into those bad situations. Well, we don't recognize that addiction to the Western diet, to these ultra-processed foods, to the high sugar, high fat, high salt foods. And it's the type of fats, by the way, that the food companies are putting the worst fats in our foods. They're not good for our bodies.
Yeah,
And so then what?
Yeah.
Trans fats, the list is long. They process these things.
Trans fats. Yeah, just
Yeah.
weird chemical
Weird
fats and fat
Yeah.
substitutes, right?
Yes, yes. And sugar substitutes also, so their low calorie sweeteners are just as bad for you, if not worse. They are often carcinogenic. They cause the same kind of reaction in the body. They aren't caloric, but they cause the body to eat more and want more and crave more. So then the people gain weight anyway. The more studies have shown that the more diet sodas people drink, the more they gain weight.
Yeah, it's
Not
crazy.
from there's no calories in the sweetener in the soda pop, but the effect on the metabolism is such.
Can we talk about, I want to shift gears just slightly. I'd love to hear you talk about Healthy at 100 and a little bit of the research that went into that. Because that's one of my favorite books. I mean, it is absolutely one of my favorites. I think it's awesome. So, and I can the premise of the book is that, the diet you're proposing and that you proposed many years ago now is not a new diet. It's not a new fad, right? Even though Diet for a New America sounds like a new thing, right? This is not a new thing at all. And so talk about Healthy at 100, what that book's about, what it touches on.
Well, in medicine, our medical system tends to look at sick people and diagnose their illness or their pathology, and then treat that or manage that disease process, usually with drugs, sometimes with surgery. It is a disease-oriented system. I think we call it healthcare, but it really should be called disease management. We don't look at the healthiest people and study them. And I thought, well, let's do that. Instead of just looking at sick people and trying to understand what makes them sick and what drugs we can use to improve that problem, I've thought, well, what if we looked at the healthiest people and see what are they doing and what's working in their lives? And so I did. I went to different cultures where the people age the best, the healthiest, where they're the most healthy centenarians. Centenarians are people who reach 100. And there are cultures, as I mentioned earlier, in our culture, half of people 85 have Alzheimer's. In these cultures, none of the people 100 have Alzheimer's. It's phenomenal.
That's better.
Yes, it's way better. And I thought, I want to age like that. And I am, actually. And my wife and I just celebrated our 49th anniversary.
That's incredible. You got to get a milestone next year.
Yes. I'm thinking we're going to climb a mountain together to celebrate. Yeah, we climbed Mount Shasta recently. We are trying to live a different way. You know, in our culture, you get older, you settle, you have to settle for, resign, you know. We identify aging with disease and infirmity and loss of function, loss of memory, senses that don't work as well, crotchety, unhappy people. I don't think aging has to be that way. And when I looked at when I wrote Healthy at 100, I looked at cultures and at people and studies of people who have aged really well, and I found out there's certain common denominators. None of them eat processed foods. None of them are overweight. You don't see fat, healthy old people. You don't in any part of the world. But you see, they're slender people. They're lean and strong people. They have a lot. They exercise a lot. That doesn't mean they necessarily go to the gym, though that's lovely too. But their body mass is mostly muscle, so their muscle to fat ratios are high, and they enjoy movement. They enjoy living. They enjoy being active. And they have strong social networks, and they believe in aging. You know, in some of these cultures, well, in our culture, if someone lies about their age, they typically lie down. They say they're younger than they are. They lie down. They lie downward. Mm-hmm. In these cultures, people lie upward if they lie, because in these cultures, there's status and prestige and influence if you're older, and they want that. So they'll say they're older than they are to kind of get that. But there's this feeling that getting older is a good thing. Growing older is a good thing. We don't have that in our society.
We have the opposite, right? We have youth worship.
Yeah, we have youth obsession and youth worship, and as if the goal of life was to remain 25. And it's particularly hard on women because as they grow older, their bodies change, they go through menopause, and society writes them off and sees them. It kind of renders them invisible in some ways. Certainly their erotic power is less, or so the society has it. I think that's cruel. I think it's completely unnecessary, and I don't think it's true.
I agree.
And with cancer rates, we think of cancer as a disease that comes with getting older, and we think that there's the reason. That's what we've been told. And we've been told that the reason cancer rates are as high as they are is because people are living longer, as if living longer meant getting higher rates of cancer. Well, in the cultures I studied and wrote about in Healthy at 100, cancer rates are extremely low at ages that are remarkable, in their 80s and 90s, and even past 100. They basically don't get cancers at any kind of level like what we do.
So they're not only living longer, but having way less cancer.
Way less cancer. They're living healthy. And of course, they tend to live in environments that are more pristine, but they're not totally pristine. There are no totally pristine places left on this planet now. So we are all bombarded by or exposed at least to a plethora of toxic chemicals in all kinds of ways, which I think makes it all the more important to take care of your health in every way you can. Drink clean water, eat organic food when you can, to reduce your pesticide exposure. And eat a healthy diet full of antioxidants and all the wonderful array of nutrients that plant-strong diets in their healthy form can provide. I think a limited amount of animal products, particularly wild fish, can be okay if your body says that that's what you want and need. But it's way less than what our society has normalized. We eat so much meat.
Difference between the amount of animal products that these healthy cultures eat, percentage-wise, versus the American diet.
Well, we have normalized getting something like 40 to 50% of our calories or more from animal products. And in these cultures, it's less than 5%. And of course, they don't eat any sugar and they don't eat any highly processed foods at all.
No Baskin Robbins.
And if you bring them a Coca-Cola can, and this has happened, researchers have done this, and they'll look at it, it's kind of pretty, it's interesting. They're open-minded people. They'll taste it, they spit it out. It's too sweet. And our taste buds have been so hijacked by the processed food industries that we think that we can't taste a berry as sweet. Right. And that's a tragedy. Whereas for them, a ripe blackberry or a ripe any kind of raspberry or blueberry is just fabulous. It's spectacular. Even ripe peas in the pond, they just pull them out and eat them. All their foods taste good. Our taste buds have been numbed by this assault of high fats, high salt, high sugar foods and the processed foods that we take for normal, that fill our supermarkets and our gas stations. A lot of people buy their food at gas stations. And there's a lot of people that don't have access to healthier food, because in what we use the phrase food deserts for areas where usually they're lower income areas. And people living there don't have access to healthy food. And their cancer rates are very high. Their diabetes rates are very high. Their heart disease rates are very high.
Fast food or the corner store.
Yeah. And we got to change that. Healthy food should be, it's one of the things that the Food Revolution Network is deeply involved with, is we think healthy food should be a right for everybody, regardless of their income level, regardless of their social class. They should have, if they're human beings, they're part of our family, they're part of who we are on earth to care for. We are interwoven with each other. And everyone should have healthy food. Just because somebody is poor doesn't mean their kids should have to grow up with stunted IQs and getting fat and obese and diabetic in their teen years and unable to concentrate in school and hyperactive from these chemicals in these processed foods. That's really we're harming these kids. And we should take care of all the kids. And that's how we build a healthier future for our country and our world. And that's how we build a healthier conscience for ourselves, because we know we're doing what we're here on earth to do, which is to take care of one another, live with respect for ourselves and each other, and bring some reverence into our relationship to the natural world and to the human heart and to what we share with each other, rather than trying to succeed at everybody else's expense. This dog-eat-dog world we've created. Dogs don't even eat dogs.
That's right. No, they don't.
No,
so let's talk about the Food Revolution Summit that's coming up April 30th.
Yes.
And
you are a part of it.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be. Last year I was a big advocate for the Food Revolution Summit, promoted the heck out of it. Try to get as many people as I could to tune in, and it was terrific. So it's really, really cool that this year I actually am a speaker on it. Which thank you so much for that. So, but talk about the summit for people that don't know what it is.
Well, it's a gathering of people who are true experts in these fields. We have an amazing lineup, really an amazing lineup of speakers. I choose all of them. I invite them, and I interview them. As you know, I do all the interviews myself, and I'm really a colleague of many of these people, and they know that. And most of them don't need any more publicity, so they don't need another interview. But they do it really to connect with me and us, and the work we're doing, the agenda, if you will, of the Food Revolution Network to make change happen for everybody, and to build a food revolution network that includes more and more people and changes things. We have a lot of goals. We want to get GMOs labeled. We want to get GMOs out of the food supply, frankly.
Yeah.
We want to get antibiotics out of factory farms, out of meat production, which would do two things. One, would save our antibiotics. Right now, they're being rendered increasingly impotent by the development of antibiotic bacteria, and that is happening in large measure because of the use of antibiotics in factory farms. And secondly,
Just consumer of antibiotics.
yes, by far.
Than humans. Animals take
Over
more antibiotics than humans.
Yes. 80% of the antibiotics produced in the United States are used as growth promotants in factory farms, not used as medicines for people. 80%.
It's insane.
So that's why we're breeding the resistance in the bacteria. Now, the other thing is they can't coop the animals up in these cruel ways that they do unless they use these drugs. So you take the drugs away, you save our antibiotics from our medical use, and also you force them to give the animals more space and to give them more natural conditions to live in, and that'd be a real plus from an ethical point of view. You know, I think factory farms are a crime against all of us. I think they're a violation of the human-animal bond.
They're awful.
The degree of cruelty. You don't have to be a vegetarian. Right. You don't have to be an animal rights activist. You don't have to join PETA. If you see what is actually done to these animals, it is so cruel. Even I think people who eat meat the most should be the most abhorred and would be the most appalled if they saw it. But the industry wants to keep the veil in place. They don't want people to see.
They want to keep using the pictures of the happy cows and chickens.
Yes.
In a pasture with the sunshine,
yes,
and the green grass.
Do. Yes, they sure do. And they want people to be ignorant and alienated from their own bodies and minds and what the truth is. So we're wanting to lift that veil and make those changes. We also want to see processed food advertising targeting kids to be banned in this country, like it is in a bunch of other countries. We want to see a lot of chemicals.
I didn't know that was banned in other countries.
It is. It is. They don't let their children be preyed on by industries selling products that are damaging their kids. They don't do that.
Wow.
I consider it a form of child abuse. I once saw a T-shirt that said, if you love, a kid was wearing it, child, if you love me, don't feed me junk food.
Right.
And I would go on a step further and say, if you love a child, don't let that child's mind be infiltrated by the advertising, the very sophisticated advertising of junk food, so that they crave it, so they think it's cool, so they feel deprived if they don't have it. And we got to change that. So we have a lot of things we want to do. We want healthy food available. We want farmers markets subsidized. We want organic food subsidized. Right now, organic food producers have to pay for the certification, which raises their costs of doing business, and that adds to the price of what they sell. Conventional, we call it, I don't know what's conventional about growing foods with poisons.
Yeah, you're right.
They get subsidized.
Conventional.
Yeah. It's like we have health foods and stores. And what are the others unhealthy food stores? I think that they should be called unhealthy food stores, and the other ones would just be food store, real food stores. I mean, I think honestly that because right now the playing field is tilted in favor of pesticide-based agriculture. That's subsidized, and GMO-based agriculture. That's subsidized. I don't want to just level the playing field, though that would be a good thing. I want to tilt it the right direction. So organic gets subsidized. It lowers the price for fresh fruits and vegetables and organic ones to everybody. Then everybody could afford them, and raise the price. I would like to see that when you grow food with poison, that poison has to be listed on the package. Let people know.
Yeah. If
Roundup is being used in the processing, let that be, say it on the package. It would be. Roundup has now been designated by the World Health Organization as a probable human carcinogen.
Yep.
And that means it probably causes cancer in people.
Yep.
And it was very close to be caught. The split, the vote on the panel was 50-50. Half wanted to call it a probable human carcinogen. The other half wanted to call it a proven human carcinogen. It is actually very close to being proven. There's very little doubt left. Scientists are always wanting to be very careful about these things. But it will be considered, it will be labeled a proven human carcinogen within a few years. And it is. And yet it is the most widely used herbicide in the history of Western agriculture. And it's massive in GMO crops, which have been engineered to tolerate, to withstand heavy doses of Roundup and its active ingredient glyphosate. So it's ubiquitous in the environment. It's ubiquitous in the food supply, and particularly in GMO foods.
And all processed foods have corn, soy, and canola in them, and those are the
Yeah,
major GMO crops.
right. And if you want to get cancer, that's the food to eat. I mean, but we don't have government protecting us and looking out after public welfare and public health. We should, but that's not what government has come to be. Government has come to do the bidding of the corporate masters, and in this case, it's Monsanto, or it's the other biotech chemical companies like Syngenta and DuPont and Dow and Bayer. They have enormous power. And then the food companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they want to use genetically engineered sugar beets for their, or genetically engineered corn to make their high fructose corn syrup. And they want to continue to saturate their foods with those ingredients.
Because it's cheaper.
It's cheaper. It's really cheap. And that raises their profit margins and raises their sales and destroys the health and I think the soul of our country.
The big ag and big food and really big pharma are all support each other. They're really all on the same team.
They do. They're often the same companies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, they are. And they sell the chemicals that cause cancer, and then they sell the chemotherapy drugs that are used to treat cancer. Now, whether those drugs work is certainly a big question. They
But it
do
doesn't
things.
matter, does it? It doesn't matter
Well,
whether they work or not.
they
They're
just
still
want
going to get paid.
They're making their money,
Yeah.
and they don't get paid when patients recover their health. They get paid when patients take chemotherapy, and they get the money that's made off of the cancer industry is staggering, and it's painful to see that those level of profits being made at the expense of people's health. You know, if the cancer industry had an answer to cancer, was in fact treating it in ways that was increased people's health and cured the cancer, which in few cases they do, but in most cases they don't. That would be one thing, but it would still stay. I would still say we should be preventing these cancers. Even if we had cures, which we don't, we should still be preventing them. And the lack of emphasis on prevention, true prevention, building health in the first place, living a lifestyle and eating food and creating the kinds of social support and the kinds of stress reduction in your life or managing stress in your life that gives you the vibrancy and the resilience and the vitality to overcome the cancer cells if they start to grow in your body. You know, your body, every one of us has cancer cells in our body.
Yep.
Why in some people do they proliferate and take over and not in others? Those are big questions. And it's not always clear what the answers are. But what is clear is the healthier a person is, the less likely it is for the cancer cells to proliferate and take over. And the more likely it is for their immune system to keep them in check.
And even if they do chemotherapy treatments, they're more likely to recover.
Yes.
You know, if they've got nutrition, a really good nutrition program in place.
Yes, and they'll have less pain and more love in their lives, more joy in their lives. You know, you can give more. Some people say, well, it's selfish to take so much care for yourself and preoccupy with your food and so forth. You can give more from a cup that is full than you can from a cup that is empty. And if you don't take care of yourself, what's going to happen for sure is someone else is going to end up taking care of you.
Yeah. Well,
so it's not selfish to care for yourself. That's how you build the strength to give the most to others and to live the life that has the most joy in it. So you emanate, you exude, you share with others your joy and your happiness and the beauty of your soul and the gifts that you're on earth to bring and to share with others. You can do that most effectively when you're healthy. and when you're vital, and when you have the food in your body that feeds your joy.
And of course, if one of your goals is to help people in life, then you can help a lot more people if you live to be 80 or 90 or 100 than if you die young, in your 50s or
Yes.
60s or 70s. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to take care of yourself. And plus, I mean, just circling back to Healthy at 100 in that book and the research behind that book, it to me, I've been in the real estate business since I got out of college, pretty much, and being in business, being self-employed, I always wanted to learn from successful people. Like early on, I realized I don't want advice from people that haven't done it, right? That aren't successful. And the same principle applies to health. Why don't we learn from successful, long-living, healthy people, right? They've set a
Yes.
precedent, right? And there are these cultures around the world. Of course, this is all in Healthy at 100 that live long, exceptional lives with low rates of chronic disease, and a lot of them just grow old and die in their sleep. That's what I want.
Yes. Yes.
Preferably the same day as my wife, right? We die on the
And
same day.
so many physicians aren't themselves healthy. There's some of
Yeah.
them are obese and drug addicted, and they have, as a profession, a lower life expectancy than the norm. They have, as a profession, higher rates of obesity than the norm, and the norm is already way too high. And they have, as a profession, higher rates of drug addiction. And of course, that is a problem across the whole culture. There's something about being a doctor today. There obviously are exceptions. There's wonderful physicians. I admire many of them, and many of them are that I admire and respect will be speakers in the Food Revolution Summit.
Yeah. The nutrition-based MDs, those are our heroes, right?
Yes, and they're going against the culture of medicine when they do that, because they're not taught nutrition, they're not taught health promotion practices in medical school. They're taught the diagnosis of disease and the treatment or management of it, primarily with drugs. There's some other protocols as well, surgery and so forth, but it's a drug-based system, and they write a lot of prescriptions, and they are continually getting continuing education credits from attending seminars put on by the drug companies.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we have.
Lots of steak dinners.
Lots of steak dinners. I spoke at a convention of cardiologists once, and they had a big steak, huge roast beef pieces, and then ice cream and cream pies for dessert, and a lot of alcohol. And I spoke after their dinner, and most of them were falling asleep. They were just so stuffed, and the alcohol contributed to that as well. And I remember thinking, they can't hear a thing. And that's part of the design, although there were a few there who weren't eating that food that it served, so they asked for a special meal, vegetables, and salads, and fruit for dessert if they had that. And if they drank, it was a modest amount. And they were bright, and they were all eager to hear what I had to say. And for their colleagues who were asleep and fat to hear, I did what I could to wake them up. I did, but there's something about the medical system that it's not filled with healthy people, and I think to go to a doctor for health advice, if they're not themselves healthy, what makes you think that their advice is going to be legitimate and valuable for you?
They can't help you. Unhealthy people can't teach you how to be healthy.
No, if they haven't learned it themselves.
Yeah.
And I mean, people can come to things later in life and still bear the results of bad habits from years. People can change at any age, to a degree.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the most remarkable things.
Like your dad.
Yes. And my God, if he could change, there's hope for anybody. He was not a flexible person.
That is amazing. John, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I'm really, really happy we got to do this. Can't wait to get it out. So let's just to recap, just for everybody listening and watching, the Food Revolution Summit 2016 is starting on April 30th.
Yes.
And again, huge lineup of speakers. We'll put a link to it in the show notes so everybody can click through. Make sure you sign up. This is a free online event. So, I mean, just sign up, tune in, pick and choose, listen to the speakers you're interested in, because there'll be a whole host of them. And so, is there anything else I should link to? Where can people find you besides the Food Revolution Network?
That's the best place.
Great.
That's the best place. And we had 170,000 registrants last year, and over 1 million free listening hours. As you mentioned, it's free to listen.
Yeah.
We're expecting possibly to double those numbers this year. When you get to those big numbers that big, we have over 300,000 members, you start to have some impact on the larger conversation.
Yeah.
One of our speakers this year is Senator Cory Booker. Last year was Congressman Tim Ryan. These are personal friends of mine. These are people who are in positions of influence in our federal government. Several of our speakers have been personal physicians of the Clintons. Dean Ornish and Mark Hyman. What?
Esselstyn.
And Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. All these are all friends of mine who have treated the Clintons, and other very, very influential people. What is happening is the food movement is starting to really make an impact. I think what we're going to see in terms of social changes and political changes in the years to come is going to be much greater than what we've seen so far. We're coming to that point where we're starting to have enough heft as a movement, momentum and numbers and commitment and purpose and passion and motivation. And if you want to be inspired and if you want to have more motivation to live healthfully and be part of a movement of people helping each other to live healthfully, this is the place to be.
It is. And, just for some perspective, you made the decision you made to walk away from Baskin Robbins in what, the 1970s?
Yes.
So I was diagnosed with cancer 12 years ago, a little bit over 12 years ago. In 2004, it was really hard to find organic food. I'm in Memphis. There was one Whole Foods, and that was pretty much it. And now today, 12 years later, I mean, organic food, it's in every major grocery store, right? I mean, Whole Foods has got a lot of competition, and that's a wonderful thing. So even though we still have a significant way to go, it's really encouraging to see how far we've come, right?
Yes, and there's 5 times more farmers markets nationwide now than there were 10 years ago.
There we go. That's cool. I did
Yes.
not know that.
Yes, and the market for organic foods, the market share that organic foods represents, is skyrocketing. It's the fastest growing market share, but part of the grocery bill that we have, and it's growing and growing and growing. And the soda pop consumption is going down, and people are waking up.
Yep.
There's lots of people who haven't yet. We all know them. We interact with them, and we watch them get sick and die. And we don't have to do that. We can be examples to them. They may or may not follow our example or heed our advice. They may not. That's their choice. But we don't have to get sick and die the way the norm is in our culture. We really do have another potential, and it's ours to take.
Perfect closing statement right there.
Thank you, Chris.
John Robbins, thank you so much. This was super fun, and I'm really excited about the Food Revolution Summit coming up, so we'll be talking more on that summit.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody, show notes and links at chrisbeatcancer.com/podcast. So, get all that good stuff there. I'll link to John's books and the Food Revolution Summit and all that stuff. So again, thanks, John.
Thank you.